Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the WWW Who Would Win? Last time we saw Godfrey, first Elden Lord, go toe-to-toe against Champion Gundyr in a duel. This time, however, we're looking at a matchup made in hell between two much less honourable combatants. Before we get into that, here's a reminder of the rules. Rule 1, the fight will take place in a 3-round structure. Whoever wins 2 rounds wins the fight. Rule 2, the rules and results will differ depending on the type of fight taking place. Rule 3, move sets are to be taken with a grain of salt, owing to the restrictions of the older games. Now, let's meet today's fighters. Introducing first, residing in Mohg's palace, the lands between. He is the devil of Elden Ring, the brother of the king, and just a straight up creep really. He is Mohg, Lord of Blood. And his opponent, from Irithyll of the Boreal Valley. He is basically the reason everything went to shit in Dark Souls 3. He is Pontiff Sulyvahn. And this fight will be taking place in the form of a trial by combat. This means that both bosses will be allowed their second phases, but Mohg will not have his lifesteal mechanic for his transition. Pontiff will be allowed his clone, but he'll have to summon him during the fight, like he does when the player fights him. With that out of the way, let's see who would win in a fight between Mohg, Lord of Blood, and Pontiff Sulyvahn. Round 1, Strengths and Weaknesses. For anyone who hasn't watched the first boss vs boss video, this section is about their strengths and weaknesses on paper, as well as any lore implications that can cause an advantage or disadvantage in the fight. Starting off with Mohg, his primary strength is his high defense against fire damage, with a whopping 80% damage reduction. He also has a rather high defense against magic, holy, and lightning damage, with 40% reduction for each. Ironically though, the Lord of Blood's greatest weakness is hemorrhage, even though he also inflicts it. He also deals standard, pierce, and fire damage, most likely due to his sacred spear. Him being a demigod also implies that he is well trained in combat, as befitting his status as the Omen King's brother. Needless to say, Mohg is a very powerful being not to be trifled with, even without his lifesteal. As for Pontiff, his greatest strength is his resistance to poison, toxic, frost, and bleed. His clone would also share these attributes, but also would share a 50% damage reduction on all damage types. As for his weaknesses, the Pontiff also has a layer of irony towards them. His weakness to thrust and lightning damage is understandable, but what isn't is his weakness to fire damage, which he also deals out. He also deals out thrust damage, but that's more understandable owing to Pontiff's lack of heavy armour. The other 2 damage types he deals out are standard and magic, owing to him dual wielding a magic and fire sword. The fire sword in question is imbued by the profaned flame. Another great weakness Pontiff Sulyvahn has is the ability to be parried, but owing to Mohg's lack of a shield, this is irrelevant. So who takes round 1? Honestly, I think it's pretty obvious. Pontiff is strong to bleed, which counteracts a lot of Mohg's attacks, but he doesn't deal any bleed damage to expose Mohg's main weakness. Fire is the deciding factor. Pontiff is very weak to it, having just an 8% damage reduction compared to Mohg's 80%, and his magic will do barely anything. That wins Mohg the round alone, but let's go further into detail. Mohg deals thrust damage from his spear, and Pontiff is not only weak to thrust damage, but he takes an extra 20% damage from them. Needless to say, if this was a 1-round fight, Mohg would decimate Pontiff. Winner of round 1, Mohg, Lord of Blood. Round 2, Feats. This section is about the accomplishments both competitors have achieved, determining which one would seem more capable of winning the fight from their history alone. Once again, starting with Mohg, he was born a demigod and twin brother of Morgott. A lot of the demigods in Elden Ring have a throne of their own, but Mohg and Morgott don't, owing to them being omens. Or omen? Mohg allegedly gained his power through communion with an outer god known as the Formless Mother, which implies that his power is not just strong, it might be otherworldly. This is without mentioning the big one, however. Somehow, Palpatine returned. Somehow Mohg managed to smuggle Miquella into Mohgwyn Palace without getting caught by any of the other demigods. This being a part of his master plan to raise Miquella to godhood and become his partner of some description. Honestly, it's f***ing gross. Let's move on before I throw up. Pontiff definitely has a high bar to clear after all that lore, but if anyone can do it, it's Sully the Pope. How to explain the feats of Pontiff Sulyvahn? Basically, if something bad's happened in Dark Souls 3, somehow Palpatine returned. Somehow Pontiff is responsible. Vort of the Boreal Valley? That Pontiff's fault. Dancer of the Boreal Valley? That Pontiff's fault. Humans turning into deformed beasts? Pontiff's been playing a lot of Bloodborne, I see. He also most likely dedicated a cult to Aldrich, which caused the devouring of several gods, including Priscilla, Nito, and most clearly Gwendolyn. Such content also suggests he had a connection to Darkstalker Karth, and possibly influenced the Twin Princes to refuse linking the First Flame. Basically, Pontiff Sulyvahn f***ed everything up, and is reaping the benefits from it. That's how he became the Pontiff in the first place. He's like the little finger of the series, which, would explain a lot, considering he was also planned to be the final boss of the game. So, who takes round 2? Once again, I think it's obvious. Mohg put up a good resume of evil deeds and accomplishments. Let's not get it twisted, but Pontiff was a major contributing factor to the world getting f***ed up. Pontiff has done more damage to the Dark Souls trilogy than Mohg could possibly ever do to Elden Ring alone. Mohg is a demigod capable of undeniable power, but Pontiff is capable of conquering the whole world without you even knowing his name. His history shows him being a sneaky, scheming, skilled tyrant that can force royal families off their thrones and turn skilled warriors into mere servants. Winner of round 2, Pontiff Sulyvahn. Round 3, combat skills. Time to sprinkle the grain of salt as it's time to talk about movesets. Mohg is one of the harder bosses in Elden Ring from his moveset alone. His spear has the reach of a giant wielding a fully grown oak tree, and he has the ability to play his favourite Slayer song, Raining Blood. Even though the bleed build-up will barely do anything to Pontiff, it still possesses the ability to stagger him. These attacks make for a very dangerous combination, both up close and far away. This is before we talk about his Phase 2, where he drinks blood-flavoured Red Bull, gains a pair of wings, and is able to perform flying attacks. These flying attacks consist of throwing blood and plunging his spear into the opponent. Mohg might be very obsessed with using blood magic, but he isn't dependent on it. His combat skills speak for themselves. What about the Pope? Well, he's not only capable of dual-wielding swords, but also making more impressive combos than a KFC bucket. This is the first time we see a 6-hit combo from the boss. One of those 6 strikes are out of rhythm, making it easy to be caught by a thrust attack. He can also lunge across the room so fast that the player locks off him, and is usually followed up by a slash or two. This is before he reaches Phase 2, where he also drinks a Red Bull and gains a pair of wings. This gives him the ability to do ranged attacks from his magic sword, whether that be a soul spear or a soul wave. His fire sword gains the ability to jump in the air and do a fire AoE. This is without mentioning the summoning of his clone, who will do the attack a moment before the real Pontiff does his. This does make Pontiff more passive, but I think that's just a matter of balancing the fight for the player, rather than an in-universe accuracy. I do still think the clone and the Pontiff would do the same attack, however. So who's winning round 3? Who's taking the win? Well, it's a tough one. Both have a good series of close and ranged attacks, and while Pontiff might be a better melee fighter, Mohg is a better ranged fighter. I think it comes down to the way they both fight that determines the victor. In a trial by combat scenario like this one, I think Pontiff would be desperately trying to close the gap, but Mohg would be too fast for him. Pontiff would attempt to strike, and Mohg would just fly in the air and strike him with a spear. Or Pontiff would attempt to summon his clone, and Mohg would just give him an onslaught of attacks. For that reason, I think Mohg would decimate Pontiff the moment either of them reaches Phase 2. Winner of round 3, Mohg, Lord of Blood. And your winner of the trial by combat, Mohg, Lord of Blood. If we were talking about a mere duel, Pontiff is undoubtedly the better fighter. You have to be a next level swordsman to be able to dual wield swords the way he does. But in a trial by combat, Mohg is just a better magic user, and has the advantage of the types of damage he inflicts. I love both of these bosses equally, but if I had to place a bet on who would win in a fight to the death, I would pick Mohg every time. Do you agree? Let me know in the comments. Also, let me know what fight you would like to see next. There won't be any video next week, as the video I have planned is a 2-week job. Once again, please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. It helps me incredibly, and it's free. Until next time, my friends.